And on the line with us is Maya Schenwar. Maya is the editor-in-chief of Truthout, where they publish my daily takes every day. And you can find two of my books, actually, on there, Rebooting the American Dream and Unequal Protection, that you can read online for free over at truthout.org. And she is the author of Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better. The website, truth-out.org. You can tweet Maya at Maya Schenwar, Schenwar, or at Truthout. Maya, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. You know, I think the vast majority of Americans have no idea that we are in the second week of what is probably the largest national prison strike in the history of the United States. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so this is the largest prison labor strike in history. And I've also been really surprised with how little media attention it's gotten, even given the quality of most of our mainstream media in this country. There's just been this silence. And this has been going on since September 9th. It started on the anniversary of the Attica rebellion. And the way that this prison labor strike has been framed is a call to end slavery in America. So most specifically, that refers to labor that's happening in prison, which is either very low paid or even unpaid. There are people who are working behind bars for free, especially in particular states. And this strike, which emerged largely out of Alabama, which is a place where people are working for very, very low wages, sometimes doing work like making license plates for the government, doing agricultural labor for pennies.
So Attica was not ignored by the media. I mean, this is the anniversary of Attica. Attica was, what, some 30, 40 years ago, wasn't it? I mean, my recollection is it happened when I was a kid.
45, yeah.
45 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that because at Attica, I mean, there was an actual riot? As my recollection is, there were even a few people killed. Is it simply that if no one dies, if there's no massive amount of blood, our news media just doesn't talk about things?
I think that that's a huge part of it. And of course, in Attica, what happened was prisoners actually held down a yard. They occupied the prison, and there was a raid, and guards were not only brought in, but there were larger authorities involved, and people were killed. And that type of thing does draw media attention, but most of what's happening inside of prisons goes completely unnoticed. And that's not just in terms of actions, because actually actions often are covered by at least some of the media, but what happens in prison on a day-to-day basis. Part of the foundation of prison is the fact that it's invisible, that we're disappearing people from society. And so that function of prison in a situation like this makes it so that unless something so extraordinary happens, and as you said, so bloody, that the media sees it as a story that will really draw eyeballs, it just goes unnoticed. And I think that, like, one of the really sad things about the fact that this strike is not being reported is that it calls attention to so many different issues that are really integral to understanding our prison system. The organizers are calling attention to not only prison labor, but also the school to prison pipeline, police violence, and the role that police play in being the gateway to the prison system. They're drawing attention to conditions within prisons beyond labor, and which is really important because many, many people in prison are not working. And so I think that if there were more media attention, this strike and this organizing would really be exposing some of the larger issues that people are facing with mass incarceration.
Right. So the form of this, this kind of started out as a "we're not slaves" strike, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that we really need to think about the fact that in more ways than one, prison is grounded in slavery. Prison evolved out of slavery. So one thing that's often referenced is the fact that the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, has this loophole where if you're convicted of a crime, you can still be enslaved. That's legal. And so after slavery was abolished, many Black people were then arrested for small things like loitering, like vagrancy, and then incarcerated and re-enslaved. And so put in
work gangs, basically, at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
All over the South.
Often employed at prisons that were built on plantations themselves. So like in Louisiana, Angola prison, that was a plantation. And now people in prison are there picking cotton, primarily Black prisoners. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Today. So we went from what the Southerners, the Confederates, love to euphemistically call plantations. I prefer to call them concentration camps. But we went from these so-called plantations. When slavery ended, they simply flipped and said, okay, instead of having the slave owners take responsibility for the slaves, we'll have the state take responsibility for the slaves and still provide those slaves to us, the plantation owners, the concentration camp owners. Is that what happened?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that you
and
can
it's happening to this day.
You can see it still happening, and it's not just in the way that incarcerated people are doing agricultural labor, because most of them are not doing agricultural labor. But the scholar Ruth Wilson Gilmore actually describes this really well, in that slavery can still very much be seen in the institution of prison, not only in that people in prison are continuing to do that kind of labor, but that they are the ones tasked with keeping the system going. So just like enslaved people were tasked with maintaining the institution of slavery, people in prison, a lot of the labor they're doing is to maintain the prison itself.
Whether it's mopping floors or cooking the food or doing the maintenance.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And keeping that system that oppresses them going. That is what they're tasked with doing.
Is there any central online organizing point for this prison strike, or for people who want to support this prison strike?
Yeah, so the outside organization that's been doing a lot of the work with it is the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, which is a coalition of people inside and outside of prisons. And they've also been working very closely with organizations like the Free Alabama movement, which is coming from inside of prisons. And this coalition has been building for years. I would definitely encourage people to check it out online. And also to keep in mind that the heart of this strike, of course, started with incarcerated people themselves. So when we think about supporting these movements, I think the first thing that we have to do is learn about what are people doing inside of prison, and remember that, you know, the agency lies with them in terms of driving this resistance.
Right. Is there a particular website or Facebook page that we can refer people to if they want to pitch in, help out, participate?
The Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee is the first place to look. And then there have also
just Google that name, Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee.
Also the Free Alabama movement. There's a lot of great information that you can find by seeking that out. And I would also encourage people to read James Kilgore's piece on Truthout, which came out on Friday, that really goes into the detail about some of the grounding of this prison strike.
Great. Maya Schenwar, truthout.org is the website. Thank you, Maya.
Thanks so much.
And her book is Locked Down, Locked Out. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.